Good evening, and welcome back to class 3 of the 6 sessions of the 6 Bardos of Padmasambhava. So far, the story that I've been telling you has started with, in class 1, an exhortation to spend the rest of your life, if it's needed, to come to some certainty about the continuity of consciousness and to investigate your own views about that and see whether you actually believe that wholeheartedly to a degree that it gives you confidence that this is what's going to happen to you. And if you are agnostic still about that, after some of the points that you could contemplate that I gave you from both quantum mechanics and from some sources in Buddhism during that first class, that if you're still agnostic after doing analytic meditations with that and just thinking about it, then perhaps by the end of this evening, you will have another approach to that. So I don't mean that if you aren't certain about that you should abandon all practice until you realize that. But just make sure that this is still something that you're considering very seriously, because if you don't believe that, your practice will be very different. And if you do wholeheartedly believe that, then you are going to be very curious about, well, if it's true that continuity of consciousness is true, then what happens after death? So now that the physicalist view that extinction or a void unknowing is what's going to happen to you, then if appearances are still going to be arising to this mind, what are the appearances and what do they mean? And how can I take advantage of the fact that consciousness, even if I, as I know myself right now, do not continue, but that my a-consciousness continues, what can I do with that information? And so the first session was about of the 6 Bardos, was the Bardo of living. And that covers the time from conception in the womb to the time when the Bardo of death begins. And the Bardo of death begins when we are on the final descent, you could say, to your destination. And that is when, in these texts, that is when you get the news of what condition it is that is going to kill you. So the diagnosis of a terminal illness, for instance, or just the exhaustion of old age, or meeting with the sudden causes of an accident or something like that. So during this Bardo of life then, the practices that are taught, because this is a long period, this is the longest of all the Bardos, from birth, for most of us anyway, that's the longest of the Bardos, from conception until death. And so what are the practices that we do during that period? The first and essential practice is shamatha practice that Rick has been teaching for the last year. And that is the practice during and techniques by which you develop a stable and focused concentration. And so stability balanced with clarity, and all based on relaxation. And when you develop that ability to do that, then you are able to move on to other practices, and they will be truly beneficial. But if you're attempting other practices with a very scattered or a dull mind, you're not going to be able to get the benefit that you would if you first spent some time training your mind about how to stay focused and how to have a balanced mind of clarity and stability. Also during the Bardo of life, and this is just kind of a table of contents of all Buddhist practices, you would work on developing bodhicitta, which is the wish to become enlightened for all, so that you can benefit all sentient beings. And that's a relative bodhicitta. And you would also begin to work on ultimate bodhicitta, which is understanding and viewing, really, the ultimate nature of reality. So then with the second class, I skipped ahead in this presentation of the 6 Bardos. Oftentimes, the Bardos are taught as 3 Bardos, sometimes 4 Bardos. And with Padmasambhava's full presentation, it's 6 Bardos. So I skipped ahead to the Bardo of Dying, which would, in the 6 Bardos, would be the 4th Bardo. And the reason I did that was because I think having had that as a prelude to tonight's class, you will really understand what the Bardo of Meditation is, which is tonight's class, and you will realize that if you really apply yourself during this Bardo of Meditation, it's hard to say achieve the Bardo of Meditation, but recognize and really are diligent about this period that is the Bardo of Meditation, which I will describe a little later, then you have an opportunity to recognize all of the stages of the dissolution that we covered in last week's class. The dissolution of the earth element into water in that inner sign of the mirage, the stage where water dissolves into fire and the inner sign of fog, the stage of fire dissolving into air and that inner sign of fireflies, and air dissolving into consciousness with its sign of an unflickering lamp. And if you, so the experience of these Bardos throughout all of the 5 Bardos other than living are really dependent on the state of your meditative concentration before you enter these Bardos. Because they can pass very, very quickly, just as a flash or a flicker. And they also can last for a very long time, or a long enough time to recognize them and take full advantage of the opportunity that these Bardos present. And we ended the class last week with this very moving presentation and reading by Lindsay of a first-person account of someone who took full advantage, Mingyur Rinpoche, in a book that was published 6 years ago, of an experience that occurred to him 14 years ago. So a contemporary figure, but obviously very well-trained, a tulku, and his experience with the mother clear light and recognizing it in the child clear light climbing into the lap of the mother clear light. So if we are really well prepared, as Mingyur Rinpoche was, this is the potential that exists for us in the at the last stage of the Bardo of Dying. And it is generally taught that the duration of the clear light, or the clear light of death, or the mother luminosity, as it's also called, will depend on our samadhi, what we are able to, basically our stability in shamatha practice. So it's said that the experience of clear light will last 5 samadhi days. And a samadhi day is your center of gravity, really, in your practice of how long you can stay in samadhi, resting in that single-pointedness, in that balance of clarity and stability without excitation or dullness. So that means that if you're able to do that for 5 minutes, then that is 1 samadhi day, and you would be able to rest in the clear light of death then for 25 minutes. And if you have no samadhi whatsoever, then that is when it would just be a flash, and you wouldn't even recognize what had happened. So it is because of that, obviously, the length of time that we will rest in the clear light of death. This is the point when the subtle consciousness has dissolved into space. And so because of that, all of the minds that generate mental affliction have vanished at that point, and all we're left with is the pure clarity and emptiness of primordial mind. And to take advantage of that, then we train during this life to maximize our duration of that experience. And we really will, most of the training that we'll be doing, or the most beneficial training, is actually going to occur in a sub-bardo of this bardo of life. So if in the full rollout of 6 bardos, there are 2 sub-bardos of the bardo of life, because these are both happening, obviously, while the 2 sub-bardos are happening while we are alive, but they are really distinct states. And when you enter one of these bardos, of the first one being Bardo of Meditation, and the second being the Bardo of Dream, you are interrupting the normal awareness of the Bardo of life, which is essentially dualistic and mistaken about the nature of both your mind and the phenomena of appearances that are arising in the mind. So these are an interruption of that normal diluted state, these 2 bardos. And because of that, they have tremendous power as well to be transformative experiences in their own right. But they are also, because of that interruption, they are tremendous preparations for the bardo of dying and the potential of recognizing the mother clear light when it arises. The bardo of meditation begins when your mind is resting in the present. This is a very interesting way of thinking about this, because there are really 2 different understandings of the term bardo. And so one you could call the relative bardo, or the conventional bardo, and that would be a period of time, this transitional process that I've been describing, of which there are 6, that has a beginning, a continuity in duration, and then a definite endpoint. So it has a beginning, a duration, and an end, all based on this idea of, or a perception of continuity, and especially, that's especially relevant really for the bardo of life because of its long duration. And so this is then where we can really see the distinction between the relative bardo, which has that perception of continuity over a long period of time, and what Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche calls ultimate bardo. And the ultimate bardo is actually the gap between moments of perception. And so the gap is a very real but very brief moment of presence. And so if we recognize that the relative bardo of, let's say, the bardo of life, which has a beginning, duration, and end, is really a string of these ultimate bardos that are all occur consecutively, but there is an overlay of a conception of continuity because our mind is shifting from one moment of perception to another moment of perception, and papering over really the gap between, so that it seems like the Bardo, the relative Bardo, is actually a solid, continuous, single event. But actually it's a myriad, almost unlimited, in the case of this Bardo of life, number of moments. And if we can really focus our mind with shamatha practice, we actually can begin to see this. And in the Gelugpa tradition, this is called subtle impermanence, where you can actually see the gap between the disappearance of one moment and the arising of the next moment of perception. So it is this experience of nowness in the gap that is the experience of ultimate Bardo. And in the experience of the gap, you find the meditative state of resting directly in self-aware wisdom. So there, in this gap, the reason that this is a genuine or ultimate Bardo is that in this gap, you're not going to find the normal, deluded, dualistic mind of the Bardo of life that occurs when you are stringing all these moments together into a single event that is continuous. So this is why it's an interruption or a transition process that is distinctly different than the Bardo of life. And the Bardo of meditation is really based on Vipassana practice, or it's linked with Vipassana practice. So there are a number of different ways that this Vipassana practice can be done. And the Vipassana means clear seeing or superior insight. And this is the point where we actually are resting in the nature of mind, or what is in Dzogchen called naked awareness, or in Mahamudra called ordinary mind. So this is the pure primordial consciousness that we have access to in this brief moment, but as a gap. But the more you train your mind, the greater and greater this length of time also becomes. So it's very interesting that there's an analog really between the briefness of the gap that you perceive in the Bardo of meditation and the briefness or the unrecognizability of Mother Clear Light in the Bardo of dying. And so if you are able to train through your shamatha practice, you can extend this practice of finding the gap and dwelling in this gap between moments of appearance. And in the Vipassana practice of the Theravadan tradition and Mahayana traditions, this really becomes an investigation of selflessness and is a logical, analytic process. And so you begin looking for a self-existent self of me or other phenomena, me or mine. And after exhaustive searching for this self-existent me, what you find is that all of these bases of designation that I designate as me, for instance, my body or my mind, are themselves just made up of parts. So there is no independent basis of designation that is me, and it just keeps going all the way down. Everything that you take as a basis of designation, for instance, the body being the face or your hands or whatever, are themselves made up of a number of parts, and all of those parts are made up of parts, etc. So this is the way that you would do that analysis in the Theravadan tradition or Mahayana tradition, and arrive at the conclusion that you have searched everywhere, and there is no self of me to be found, and that there is no self of phenomena to be found. But in the Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions, which I studied in that first tradition for 25 years or so, or 20 years, and then in the Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions now for about 15 years. And there's a distinct difference in that in the Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions, the recognition is that when you come to that logical conclusion, it is still a conceptual experience. And you might remember in the one class that I taught about a month ago about analytic meditation, the 3 types of meditation within the analytic tradition. And the first being review meditation, where you're just going over a list of arguments. The second being analysis, the real analysis where you are debating with yourself or about a particular point. And really drawing on the conceptual intelligence to analyze a point from every conceivable angle. And then something really interesting happens after you do that for a period of time, where all of a sudden the conceptual mind just, as it were, evaporates, and you are left with this non-conceptual understanding of what had been purely conceptual before, and that is called placement meditation. Then you rest in that placement for as long as you possibly can, which at first will be brief, and then you go back to the analysis and generate another non-conceptual moment or state for some time. And then they just become longer and longer until you achieve what is called the uncontrived experiential realization then, where you have, whenever you bring the topic to mind, you have the realization without going through the analysis. So that's the way the Theravadan and Mahayana would work with this analytic meditation of selflessness, go through all the analyses until you reach the point of that aha moment, and then rest in that non-conceptual knowing for as long as possible. So they still arrive at a non-conceptual understanding, but is by way of analysis. And in Dzogchen and Mahamudra, the idea is just to, based on the understanding that the conceptual mind that does all of the logical analysis and its conclusions are all still firmly rooted in samsara, and you will never be able to fathom non-conceptuality with a conceptual mind. And so the idea is just to observe the mind directly and let the mind itself then point out the nature of mind. And what is pointed out to us when we are looking at the mind itself in these traditions of Mahamudra and Dzogchen, the true nature of mind you are looking at is found simply in whatever you experience now, in this very moment. And there is no true nature beyond that. And it's very common, I think, in our meditative experience to, in our meditation, try to achieve a certain state and to have a virtuous mind and to work on developing a virtuous mind through our meditation. And so, for instance, if anger is arising in your mind during a meditative session, you might be tempted to push that away and think, no, I shouldn't be getting angry right now. I should be experiencing the nature of mind. But in the Dzogchen approach and Mahamudra, you're not going to find the nature of mind in anything other than the anger that is appearing to your mind in this very moment. So you don't prefer one thought over another, but it is whatever is appearing in your mind is the source that you're going to be using for focusing on and revealing the nature of mind itself. And this was stated by Kamtro Rinpoche III, who is like the Dalai Lama of the Drukpa Kagyu tradition in, I think it was the 1600s, in an extraordinary book called The Royal Seal of Mahamudra, Volume 1, a guidebook for the realization of co-emergence, which is a text that I spent a good deal of my retreat studying and practicing. In this text, Kamtro Rinpoche III says, "Therefore, basic nature and its radiance are inseparable." So this is, basic radiance would be the nature of mind, or the emptiness of the mind, and radiance, which would be the luminosity of mind. He's making the point, basic nature and its radiance are inseparable. They co-emerge. The basic nature of the mind is the unoriginated, intangible, luminous Dharmakaya. Its unimpeded natural radiance arises as the myriad thoughts and phenomena. These two are, for example, like the sun and its rays, or water and its waves. It is impossible to separate them. This is exactly what we discover then when we rest in the nature of mind, when we are observing appearances that arise to the mind, is the non-dual emptiness and luminosity of the appearance and of the mind itself to which this appearance is appearing. And once we have realized the nature of a single thought, then we have realized the nature of all thought. It's as if you analyze water and realize that this H2O is 2 parts hydrogen to 1 part oxygen, and then you don't have to analyze every other water that you encounter. It is still H2O, and you recognize that whether it is in a bottle that is labeled Perrier or it's in a foul toilet, it's still H2O. So the view of Mahamudra, meaning the perspective, I guess, from which reality is perceived in Mahamudra and Dzogchen, is intended to reveal what is called the ground. And the ground is the true nature of phenomena. And again, this true nature of phenomena that you're going to be experiencing will be direct, uncontrived, and experiential rather than conceptual. Gyatro Rinpoche pointed out in his text, A Spacious Path to Freedom, which is an extraordinary Mahamudra text. He said, "A mind imbued with conceptual elaboration is a mind of samsara. A mind free of conceptual elaboration is liberated. The very nature of the mind itself is primordially, intrinsically free from conceptual elaboration. Consequently, when we abide in that state, we are abiding in the essential nature of mind. That is nirvana." So in this approach, you determine the nature, or you approach the nature of mind simply by looking directly at your mind, and that is what reveals its nature. And so Gyatro Rinpoche said, we abide in that state in non-conceptuality, abiding in the essential nature of mind. And I'd just like to share a little anecdote about the author of that statement, Gyaltro Rinpoche, who was Lama Allen's main Dzogchen teacher and the head of the Nyingma order in North America, and someone that the 16th Karmapa said, told him in Hawaii at one point, you are the best of our tulkus. So he was an extraordinary man who kept, and practitioner who kept a lot of his, until the very end, kept a lot of his higher powers, you could call them, secret, because he didn't want that to be the basis of attracting students in the West. And it was only just as he was dying that a book came out that was detailing some of the extraordinary extra perceptions that he had and real powers that he had. And it was, Gyaltro Rinpoche died 2 years ago, and at the age of 98. And it was, the timing of his death was really extraordinary for us at Mio Samten Ling in Crestone, Colorado, because Lama Allen, who was his primary translator for about 18 years and translated 5 very important texts, Dzogchen texts, that he taught over the course of a number of years, spent about 12 years teaching those texts to us in a series of 8-week retreats. So every year we would get together and study a new text. And the last of these was Vajra Essence, which we spent 4 years on. And it was just at the beginning of the very last of these retreats, when it was the last of the series that Lama Allen was teaching of Gyaltro Rinpoche's teachings, Gyaltro Rinpoche passed. I think it was in about the second week of that 8-week retreat. And so I think you got an idea from what Lindsay and I taught last session about this tukdam that occurs when you are resting in the clear light of death. So as I mentioned, the clear light of death can pass in a finger snap, or it can, for a very high practitioner, it can last for 5 samadhi days. And those samadhi days can be quite long. And for very highly realized lamas, that could be, tukdam could be 3 days, sometimes 7 days. Very rarely do you hear about 13 days or even 14 days. You know, it's almost legendary in Tibet to rest in tukdam for that long, because that is a period where the body still is not rigor mortis, and the heart is still warm, the complexion is still rosy. If you pinch the skin returns to its pliant state rather than being puckered up like it would be if you were dead. So consciousness has not left the body for that period of tukdam. So for some, it's an extraordinary sign of high realization when this occurs. So we were really at Mio Samten Ling. Lama Allen was very dedicated to finishing the retreat, the 8 weeks of the retreat. And so we were all quite despondent that we were going to miss the preparations for not a cremation, but a sea burial at the end of his tukdam. But the tukdam of Gyaltro Rinpoche just didn't end. It went on and on and on, and lasted almost an unheard of, almost a full month. And so because of that, it worked out perfectly, the timing, that we were able to end our retreat right on schedule at noon at the end of the 8 weeks, jump on a plane for the Bay Area by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then get there the day before the sea burial. And the night before the sea burial, there was a final, very large ceremony with hundreds of people there. And there were all kinds of ceremonies with confetti and strings and throwing of rice and all of that, and it just made a huge mess in the temple. And so everybody, all of the members of Gyatro Rinpoche's Sangha were busy with other things, getting prepared for the following day, the sea burial. And so this little group from Crestone took over and cleaned up the temple. It took, an hour and a half or something like that. We had to move all the cushions and the tables and sweep everything up. And so after we were finished cleaning, everybody had gone except a couple of the highest people in the Sangha. And we asked them if we could just spend a little time meditating with Gyatro Rinpoche in his kudang, which is still where he was resting in the mandala, in this shrine. And so we spent probably another hour and a half or 2 hours just meditating in the final day of Gyatro Rinpoche's presence here before the sea burial. And so, and that was a very powerful experience because you could still feel his presence even though his tukdam had ended, but you could still feel that he had not left. So anything that Gyatro Rinpoche has his name on, I pay special attention to now, and which is thankfully many thousands of words and lines and many texts that he left us. So when we are resting in this direct experience then that comes from watching appearances and recognizing their nature, what we come to realize is that the essential nature that we are witnessing is the unity of emptiness and luminosity. And that unity in the Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions is understood as the unity of emptiness and the luminosity of clarity. The unity of emptiness and luminosity of clarity means that the nature of emptiness is luminosity. So this is a non-dual, and oftentimes you see the term hyphenated, emptiness, luminosity. And so what they really are getting at with that hyphenation is that these two, emptiness and luminosity, are non-dual. And that non-duality really means emptiness is luminosity and luminosity is emptiness. And when we actually experience the mind's nature, we have nothing to say about it because there is no conceptuality that can capture the experience, because it is a non-conceptuality of pristine awareness that is beyond all conceptuality. And this is captured by Tilopa in his Ganges Mahamudra instructions to Naropa. So it was just at the time when Naropa had been well prepared and was receiving his final instructions. And this Ganges Mahamudra text of Tilopa is actually the first Mahamudra text that was ever written down. Before that, it had always been an oral tradition. And there's one line that really is important, many of the many lines in this spiritual song, this doha, that Tilopa sang to Naropa. The mind is like the midst of space. It is inconceivable. So that is the midst, not mist, of space. So meaning that it is like the center of space. And this is our approach also to looking at these appearances, because we understand that when we are looking at the horizon of the sky, there are lots of things to look at. Houses and trees and people walking and cars going, and there's just an endless variety of phenomena at the horizon. But when you look up into the middle of the sky, which is one of my favorite meditations to do in Crestone, where the sky is almost always blue, I have a zero gravity chair and go out onto my porch and just look up into the sky, which is just an empty, vast blueness. When you look up into the midst of the sky, what you actually see is, or recognize or realize, is space rather than sky. And space has no coordinates within it. So there are no reference points. It is the midst of sky, meaning the center of the sky, where there are no appearances. It's just a vast unity of emptiness and luminosity. So this is a very common simile used in Mahamudra and Dzogchen texts, that the sky or the mind is like space. And you see this over and over again as an explanation of how we can approach our meditation and what the nature of our experience will be when we actually recognize the nature of mind. And with these appearances as well, if we are looking at the appearances that arise in the mind while we are doing our meditation, then we will be probably transfixed by these appearances and go wandering with them. And if we are looking instead at the space of the mind in which these appearances arise, that is like looking into the midst of the sky, where all you see is a luminosity and emptiness with no appearances. But that doesn't mean that in our meditation practice we should try to force out all appearances, and that the whole point of our meditation practice in our Vipassana in this tradition should be to force out all conceptuality, or that the whole point of meditation is to stop all thoughts. Because it is impossible to stop all thoughts, because the whole function of awareness is to generate appearances. And even if we could, the total absence of thought then would only be revealed as another thought. So there's just no way that we can possibly eliminate all thoughts. So don't feel bad if you're not able to do that, because that has never been the goal of meditation anyway. But what we are trying to do is to see the nature of the appearances that arise, and then let the nature of the appearances, the empty, luminous nature of the appearance, reveal the empty, luminous nature of the mind. As Tilopa said again to Naropa, or sang to him, I should say, "Child, it is not appearances that fetter you, but craving. Therefore, Naropa, cut through craving." So a very important phrase in Dzogchen that is worthy of a tattoo is, the appearance is not the problem. So it is not the appearance or the fact that any mental affliction even is appearing, but it is our reaction to them and our grasping to this appearance as being substantial and somehow defining who I am. So in the shamatha practice that Rick has been teaching, and I have been teaching in retreats for a number of years now, the whole goal is to develop your balanced mind of stability and clarity, beginning with an external object like a stick or a stone or an image of the Buddha, and then moving on to other less, more internal, but still classified as shamatha with a sign. So the breath, for instance, working with the breath and developing stability and clarity with that, and then moving on to taking the mind as the path and taking whatever appears, all the thoughts, images, emotions that arise in the mind as your object of meditation. But so that is shamatha practice. But the goal of this Bardo of meditation and vipassana practice in the Dzogchen tradition is not just to be aware of the appearance or to recognize the appearance when it is there, which is an achievement in itself, but to recognize the nature of the appearance as it is arising. And if we recognize the appearance, then we will also recognize the nature of the mind. But once we achieve shamatha, which is a resting with three qualities of non-conceptuality, luminosity, and bliss, in this consciousness that is called substrate consciousness, which is a consciousness that is upstream, you could say, from the bifurcating mind of the mentally afflictive consciousness that divides all perception into a subject and object. So above that, so above the realm of duality, is this state of consciousness called substrate consciousness that you can access with shamatha practice. But that is not the full goal, because it is still easy to become addicted to the non-conceptuality, luminosity, and bliss that are the hallmarks of shamatha practice. And so all of the shamatha teachers have warnings about this danger, because it's very easy when you achieve that or experience non-conceptuality, luminosity, and bliss, even for a very short time, that you think, well, what else is there? What could be better than this? And just to decide to call it good right there and just cling to that experience. So the question then is, once you reach that state of non-conceptuality, luminosity, and bliss in substrate consciousness, how do you actually cut through then to pristine awareness? Because that is the awareness, the primordial consciousness that really has the power to set us free. That is the nature of mind that we are going to be encountering in the Bardo of death. And if we can cut through to that consciousness so that we have a real experience of it, then the chance of recognizing the mother clear light with our child clear light is greatly enhanced when we reach that point at the Bardo of death. And so this is the advice of Padmasambhava himself on how to take that step from resting in shamatha to cutting through to pristine awareness. And this is the advice of Orgyen Rinpoche, which is an epithet of Padmasambhava. Oh, once you have calmed the compulsive thoughts in your mind right where they are, and the mind is unmodified, isn't there a motionless stability? Oh, this is called quiescence, but it is not the nature of mind. Now, steadily observe the very nature of your own mind that is being still. Is there a resplendent emptiness that is nothing, that is unestablished in the nature of any substance, shape, or color? That is called the empty essence. Isn't there a luster of that emptiness? that is unceasing, clear, immaculate, soothing, and luminous, as it were. That is called the luminous nature. Its essential nature is the indivisibility of sheer emptiness, not established as anything, and its unceasing, vivid luster. Such awareness is resplendent and brilliant, as it were. So that is the pith advice on how to cut through to pristine awareness once you have achieved shamatha. You invert the awareness on to the mind that is experiencing the non-conceptuality, luminosity, and bliss, and ask, what is the nature of this mind? And that, because of your stability and clarity of mind developed with shamatha practice, will, after some time, and after you achieve shamatha, Lama Allen has said it can happen very quickly, perhaps a week or something like that, that you would be able to cut through to this pristine awareness. And then Karma Chagme, who is this extraordinary master from the 16th century, had this to say about Orgyen Rinpoche's description there of how to cut through to pristine awareness. Karma Chagme comments in the text, A Spacious Path to Freedom. In the freshness of its own present, unfabricated way of being, there is the ordinary consciousness of the present. When it stares at itself, with this observation there is a vividness in which nothing is seen. This awareness is direct, naked, vivid, unestablished, empty, limpid luminosity, unique, non-dual clarity and emptiness. It is not other than this very self-awareness. This is a real introduction to the primordial nature of being. So there you have it. You cut through by inverting your awareness on the mind that is experiencing the three temporary states still of non-conceptuality, luminosity, and bliss. And then what you achieve with that is what Karma Chagme calls a real introduction to the primordial nature of being. And then Gyatro Rinpoche, with a commentary on that, also states, enlightenment is nothing other than the nature of your own mind. Do not look elsewhere. So this is all, we finally understand exactly now what enlightenment really is. It is this understanding and perceiving directly and dwelling, resting continually in this non-dual state of luminosity and emptiness, which is the nature of the primordial mind. So that will lead you to the identification of Rigpa. And now that you have experienced that, Rigpa, and even as a glance or a glimpse, how is it then that you stabilize in that? How do you make that a continual meditative experience? How do you, in other words, once you have trained the mind to stay where it is, or once you have directed your mind, how do you train your mind then to stay where you have directed it? And that is, you are directing your mind to the nature of mind itself. And how do you sustain your mind then, resting in that perception of the nature of mind? And this is called, in Dzogchen meditation, is called non-meditation. And it has a few points that are emphasized here on how to do a non-meditation in the Dzogchen tradition. No activity, don't do anything. No striving, no desire, no modification, don't fix anything. Because you are resting in primordial awareness, there is nothing to do. All of these are describing conceptual states of mind, a striving for something that you don't have. But when you have everything that there is, what need is there for striving or for wishing for something other than what is exactly happening in this very moment? And then the ability to rest within our immediate experience is going to be especially important to us in all phases of the 6 Bardos. And I think you have an idea now, if you can develop this recognition of the nature of mind in your meditative experience in this life, how well prepared and how confident you are going to be when you go through the process of dying, and you have the stability and clarity to recognize all the stages of the dissolution as they're happening, and then be well prepared to take advantage of the experience when subtle consciousness dissolves into space, and there is only mind now, only pure mind, that it doesn't just disappear in a flash, but that you will recognize it, and your child luminosity will leap into the lap of the mother luminosity because you have recognized her as the mother. Well, let's do a guided meditation then. And if you are all up for it, I would like to, because this is all of the experience that I've been describing, obviously, is going to come in meditation experience. And so this will be a full Gautaka then, 24 minutes. So that's a fairly long time. And so you should find a comfortable position, one that you can maintain without fidgeting or moving for 24 minutes. And if you'd like to stretch and stand up, prepare yourself now for remaining still and silent. Just as a final comment before the meditation, all of that may sound so incredibly beyond your reach now of actually resting in this primordial consciousness. But I think if you take this approach of the gaps, you can experience exactly what it is in a brief period. And even when you if the outcome of this life is that you don't become enlightened in this life, and you haven't fully achieved shamatha or realized the nature of mind, that you're still going to be well prepared to recognize the Mother Clear Light because you've heard about it and you know what how to look for it and what it means. So as with that, also with this meditation, if it seems like some of the points that I'm raising are not quite within your reach right now, just relax and take it all in and try to capture it as a seed that will prepare you for recognizing what's to come. Padmasambhava's advice is to begin each meditation session by settling the body, speech, and mind in their natural states. Settle the body in its natural state of relaxed ease, stillness, and vigilant attention. By releasing and relaxing ever more deeply with each exhalation. And settle the speech in its natural state of effortless silence. Let the breath find its own rhythm without forcing it to be long or short. And settle the mind in its natural state of vivid presence. Do not pursue thoughts of the future or go back to the past. This now is all that there really is. Let that be the focus of your awareness. And from that relaxed stillness, observe all of the appearances that arise, the shooting stars of thoughts, the rainbows of images, all appear but are insubstantial. See these seemingly objective appearances for what they really are. Just empty configurations of the space of the mind. All these mental appearances are simply formations of space, like clouds emerging from the blue sky without any substance, and then dissolving back into the blue sky. All these mental appearances, coming and going, arising and passing, individual moments. We believe in the solidity of our experiences of our mind because we have one thought and then we jump to the next thought. The apparent reality or solidity of these thoughts rests on the continuity that we perceive between these separate moments. The more peaceful your mind becomes, the less frantic is this apparent continuity. And you can recognize between the disappearance of one appearance and the arising of the next a gap. Recognize the gap when it occurs. And rest there for as long as it remains. In that gap, you can recognize and experience the true nature or essence of mind. Simply rest your awareness in the present moment. Wide open, free of distraction, free of grasping to the mind as solid and continuous. As you rest in the stillness and a thought appears, recognize not only the presence of a thought, but recognize its nature, non-dual luminosity and emptiness. Vipassana practice often involves inquiry. These thoughts that arise, where do they come from? Where do these thoughts abide during the now of its appearance? As you rest there without doing anything, it becomes increasingly apparent to you that all appearances are nothing other than luminous displays of pristine awareness. And the non-dual emptiness and luminosity of the appearance reveals the non-dual emptiness and luminosity of pristine awareness. All these appearances arise to lead you along the path to your complete awakening. Refine your awareness so that the moment an appearance arises, you recognize the appearance and its nature simultaneously. Simply rest in fresh, unmodified present awareness. Don't do anything. Don't strive for anything. Don't desire an outcome. Don't fix anything. The Tibetan master Dong Kachupa says, The body and mind are unestablished, like a rainbow in the sky. They appear, but are empty. Whoever realizes this dissolves like space into space. And when that happens, what a sight it is. What a sight it is. With vivid awareness, recognize your own Buddha nature. Appearances as the luminosity of mind, the Sambhogakaya. The emptiness of mind, Dharmakaya. And all-pervasive compassion fuels spontaneous actualization, Nirmanakaya. As Yangtang Rinpoche said, the pristine awareness of the three kayas is just that. So recognize that, and recognize that it is nothing other than that. Well, that's all for tonight. And I hope you can spend some time this week in the Gap. Next week, we will begin to explore the other sub-Bardo of the Bardo of Living, the Bardo of Dreaming, and get into very clear and practical instructions for developing lucid dreaming, and also instructions on realizing illusory body, and a little bit about how to approach trying to remain aware during states of deep dreamless sleep. So all of which are going to prepare you very well for the Bardos after death. Any questions about anything we've covered tonight or before?
Everything was completely clear. No questions.
Terrific. Well, very. Well, I think you're up for next week then.
Wow.
Two questions. The first is, I'd never heard about the mother and child clear light, just kind of what that refers to.
The mother clear light is the experience that Lindsay read to us of, so this is primordial consciousness, which is the real deal. So this is primordial and indestructible nature of your own awareness. And the child clear light is our development of the path to recognizing the clear light. So it's where we are in our understanding of clear light. And so just from, you might not have had any experience at all of clear light before the last two classes, but now you have, as part of your repertoire, a child clear light understanding that when you recognize the mother clear light, the real thing, at the time that your mind dissolves or the consciousness dissolves into space and all that's left is mind, then you will recognize that, and it's said the child will leap into the mother's clear light because it recognizes it as the mother, and that sweet reunion of child and long absent mother.
I have one question. Is I know not everyone here is a practicing Buddhist, and if there are any terms that you don't understand, like what a tulku is, who and what it is, or the definition of Mahamudra, maybe we can actually start building a little glossary on the resource page or point them to a place. Or could you just quickly explain who and what a tulku is?
Yeah, a tulku is a highly realized being within the practice of Tibetan Buddhism. And these are beings who, because of their powerful bodhicitta, decide to, even though they are highly realized, they decide to return so that they can be of benefit in their teachings to us and their demonstration of a model of how to go about practicing. And so a tulku is somebody who has been, first of all, a master of all of these Bardo practices, so that they have tremendous confidence at the time that they die, that they will be able to redirect their consciousness into a rebirth that they are going to leave hints about, or sometimes overt statements of where they will be reborn, to what family, in what province, etc. And then a search is undertaken for the reincarnation of the tulku. And then the tulku is enthroned at the monastery which he was the abbot of most often, and then acquires, like a corporation almost, acquires all of the property and belongings of the previous tulku. And students are very eager to study with the new tulku, or the new incarnation of their previous teacher. And oftentimes these tulkus display really remarkable cities and memories of their previous lives, and recognize people that were important figures for them in their previous life. Or as one story that I heard from somebody who had direct knowledge of this, one tulku, when he came back, and was getting, as a young boy, was getting into a car that had belonged to the previous tulku, brought the driver of the car back, who was the driver of the previous tulku also, back to the back of the car and pointed that license plate is still missing a screw. And so it was. So that's a tulku. What about Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, those terms? So there is a trinity in Buddhism, just as there is in Christianity. And not being a scholar of comparative religion, I wouldn't dare to say how they really compare. But it's interesting. The trinity in Tibetan Buddhism, or in Buddhism, is the Dharmakaya, which is the emptiness. So these akaya actually is Tibetan for Buddha, body. And so these are three bodies of a Buddha, but they're really just three aspects. You can't really think of them as substantial bodies, but a body is just a figurative term for an aspect, a way that you can understand the mind and experience of a Buddha through these three bodies. So the Dharmakaya is the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. The Sambhogakaya is the luminosity. So there you have the non-dual luminosity and emptiness. That is also the nature of your own mind. And then the Nirmanakaya is called the emanation body. And this is the spontaneous actualization, not produced by causes and effects, but just spontaneously arising. It could be the Buddha appears in a certain way as an emanation, as a cooling breeze, for instance, or as an important figure in your own life, etc. But it's said that the essential nature of primordial consciousness is emptiness, the Dharmakaya. The manifest nature of primordial consciousness, of your primordial consciousness, is the manifest nature is Sambhogakaya, luminosity. And the all-pervasive nature is compassion, which is what powers spontaneous actualization, which is Nirmanakaya. So it's just three aspects of the experience of a Buddha.
Thank you. I think that's helpful for people.
And what's really important is exactly what Yangtang Rinpoche, who is also a teacher of mine and of Lama Allen's, who is regarded as a tulku, who is a reincarnation of the great Dzogchen, one of the people who brought Dzogchen to Tibet, Vimalamitra. So what important thing about the three kayas, or the three bodies of a Buddha, is exactly what Yangtang Rinpoche gave to us at the end of that meditation. The pristine awareness of the three kayas is nothing other than that. And so recognize that it is nothing other than that. Meaning, and what he's referring to is that it is the emptiness of your own mind. It is the luminosity of your own mind. And it is the compassion that motivates spontaneous actualization. So all of the bodies of a Buddha are to be found as the nature of your own mind. That's the point he's making. And that is our Buddha nature.
I almost don't know how to thank you. But I feel I'm expressing the entire group to say really that these are extraordinary teachings. You make them understandable, and sometimes they're overwhelming. But many in this group studied under Lama Marut and went to the retreats and had a foundation to begin to understand this. And we have, of course, missed him tremendously and been without him. And you have descended on Anasquam as such a deep and compassionate teacher. I know that there is much that we can understand and much that we must continue to explore and try to understand. But I appreciate all the levels that you're teaching at, all that you are giving us, and I know I'm speaking for the group. Thank you so much, Doug.
Oh, thank you. It's my great pleasure. And as any teacher will tell you, I get more out of it as a teacher than anybody possibly could in hearing the words that I'm saying, because of the preparation that it takes to do one of these classes. I actually have spent months at preparing this particular night, and such as it is. But so in giving these teachings to you, it's clear to me my own motivation. I'm preparing for my own death. And so I hope that this is the spirit that you will also take this in, that you can now approach death in a way that maybe you wouldn't have before.
Hi there. So this is pretty heady stuff. Listening to it, and I'm new to it, and I'm wondering, can you simplify it? Like a few things you could do on a daily basis to bring this into your world. Like, are there 3 things that you do daily practices that would get us closer to being clear about all this stuff? Like sort of like Buddhist light for beginners or something.
So I think probably the pith instruction from tonight would be to mind the gap. Because then the experience of the non-conceptuality and primordial consciousness that is our birthright in our Buddha nature and is there to be discovered, can be discovered in its real form, but it'll be brief at first. But if you just are able to rest in that, slow your mind down so that you're not papering over those gaps with a conception of continuity that doesn't exist, then something, there will be an aha moment there of experience. But otherwise, the entire Buddhist path could probably be summarized simply as being kind to others. And you hear that message in this church every Sunday, and very direct, clear instructions for how to practice. And it's so inspiring to be going to hear these messages personally every Sunday. And but that's a message that Christianity and Buddhism have in common, that we all want to be happy and recognize that all others want to be just as happy as you want to be, and all people would like to be free of suffering. So if you can, whatever you can do to, as Mary McKillop said, never see an unmet need without doing something about it, and really prepare yourself for ambiguous situations that you might encounter, that you're not sure, as Reverend Sue was describing either last Sunday or the Sunday before, about expanding the sphere of your caring to strangers. And if you're just prepared to do that, you'll encounter ambiguous situations, and you won't do as I do when I go to New York City and I see somebody lying on the street. And I just naturally say, this isn't my town. I don't know what's really going on here. But you would act.
When you said mind the gap, I am from New York City, and that's what they say in the subway.
Yeah.
You know, mind the gap between the subway
Yeah.
cars. So I've got a dual nature with mind the gap.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I say that, because that's exactly what you see in London tubes also.
And the truth, just by way of what you're saying, is if anyone is interested, what we're trying to do interstitially, like between the great opportunity to have Doug here and what we're doing in the winter, is to break it down into these small pieces about what do you do off the cushion, how do you bring it into your life, and how to, kind of step your way through some of these meditations to build your way up. And we'll continue with that in the fall. So if that's of interest, we'll try to.
Yeah. And that really is the only reason that I would dare to bring topics like this that are so advanced, really, is because I know that there's a strong foundation here in people that have studied for a number of years, and that Rick and Lindsay are going to be here, and other people in the Sangha are going to be here long after I leave, and will be able to fill in all the gaps that you're going to be recognizing.
Finding the gap. Oh, you think you're leaving?
Well, I become less and less sure about that every week. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, have a good week. Thank you for coming.